take a look at number 5 from your composite inverse trig functions worksheet. On number 5, we're asked to analyze what the inverse sine of -2/3 is. I don't know what that angle is, and I don't need to know what that angle is in order to find eventually what the secant of that angle is. So let's think about what we know about the inverse sine function. We know we have to restrict the domain to inverse trig functions because sine, cosine, tangent do not pass the horizontal line test. If you look at this graph on Desmos, the sine wave repeats over and over and over again. But if we restrict the domain to -π/2 to +π/2, then we see it goes from its min all the way to its max, and those y values never repeat. So this will pass the vertical and the horizontal line test. But if I'm restricting the domain to -π/2 to +π/2, that means my answers for where this angle, this unknown angle is going to go from -π/2, which is the same as 3π/2, to a +π/2. Will be somewhere between these two angles, which means the second and the third quadrant are out. Now let's go back to our understanding of sine function from geometry. SOHCAHTOA told us that the sine ratio is going to be the opposite side over the hypotenuse. Well, if I'm restricted to the first or the fourth quadrant, and sine I know is negative, that's telling me that this triangle that I'm going to set up for an unknown angle is in the fourth quadrant because sine is negative in the fourth quadrant. So I'm going to sketch a little triangle here. I don't know what this angle is. I don't need to know what this angle is, but I do know that the opposite side of this angle is -2. We're in the fourth quadrant, so that y value is going to be -2, and the hypotenuse is 3. Now here's my angle, theta. I'm being asked to find secant of this angle, theta. I don't need to solve theta in order to do that. What I need is an understanding that secant is the reciprocal of cosine. Cosine is adjacent over the hypotenuse. SOHCAHTOA, adjacent over hypotenuse. So we need to find this adjacent side. Pythagorean theorem allows us to do that. X squared plus -2 squared equals 3 squared. X squared plus 4 equals 9. That means x squared is going to equal 5. X equals square root of 5. It is going to be positive. Cosine's positive in the fourth quadrant. So the cosine of this angle is √5/3, which means the secant of this angle is 3/5. Now the only issue is we don't usually leave irrational numbers in a denominator, so we rationalize. I'm going to multiply this by √5/5, and I get 3√5/5.